I'm into AA. I work these steps. I dedicated my life to this way of living because alcohol took everything that I loved, and I really could not stop drinking. I tried, but I could not. I was taught to go through the work every year. And so not everybody does that, but that's how I was taught. So every year prior to my AA birthday, I go through this work. And so I am from the Mohican tribe. That's my tribe that I was born into. And our tribe is the clan system. So I was born for the Turtle Clan on my mother's side. And my Indian name is Tantanka Wamble. That name was given to me by the elders when I was given this responsibility to be this keeper of a hoop of 100 eagle feathers. It's a ceremonial thing. And my first wife and I, we ended up divorcing. I had done a lot of damage there. We're good friends today, but it wasn't like that at first. And so things was going really well. And there came a point in my sobriety where all of a sudden I got weird, and meetings got really stupid to me. And I started to judge in my meetings. And it seemed like some of these guys, they said the same dang thing every dang meeting since I was going to it. I could lip sync and say the same thing, and they would laugh just like it was last year, but it was 10, 12, 14 years ago. And so I got really judgmental, and I was slipping. I couldn't read. It seemed like I couldn't read that book anymore. What I felt was I was setting myself up to drink. I could feel it coming on. Just none of this stuff, was working. And so, about that time, I run into this Indian guy, Johnny Looking Cloud, and he was sober a long time, probably in his 40 years sobriety. And so we were sitting in his backyard, and he said, "How long have you been sober?" Exactly. And so I told him exactly. I think it was like 3 years and 3 months and, some days, whatever it was then. And so he said, "You're right where you're supposed to be." He said, "We watched, he said, you come in and we watched you go to the step meetings and big book meetings, and, you seem like you're catching on to it." And we're sitting in his backyard, and he said, "What I want to talk to you about is," he said, "it's now time that you bring your Indian culture into the AA." He said, "You've gone through this work with Frank, you've gone through with Don," and he said, "You're an Indian." And he said, "AA is not a white man's program." He said, "This program is about recovery." And he said, "The thing that's missing for you is all those things that your grandpa taught you." And I was raised by my grandpa, back on the reservation. And so he said, "How long are you sober?" And the reason he said you're right where you're supposed to be is, he said, "What you need to know is," he said, "is that when you look at the culture and you look at the 12 steps," as he said, "this is what the 12 steps is about for you." He said, "A long time ago," he said, "when the Creator made the earth," as he said, he made this earth have a system of cycles and system of seasons. And everybody has the system or cycle or seasons. The salmon has theirs. They swim up for 4 years. They got to come back, find the same river that they swam down from. They got to swim up that river. And he said, everything has circles and cycles and seasons. And he said, that's also true in sobriety. And he said, what it was in the old days, your ancestors, what they said, they learned that there's a world that you could see. They called it a physical world. And then they said there was a world you could not see. They call that the spiritual world or the unseen world. And he said, these two worlds, they're run by a set of laws. There's spiritual laws, there's physical laws. And he said, so the way that it was for you, the human, is he said, there's a set of principle laws and values that you had to live by to be in harmony. And he said, each of the animals, each of the plants, they all have their own. But he said, you have this set of principle, laws, and values. And this is what the human being, how you're supposed to run by. And he went on and he said, the human being, our cycle, he says, is a 4-year cycle. He says, the oak tree, it will do 4 seasons in 1 year, spring, summer, fall, winter. But he said, the human, our cycle is 4 years. You have 1 year of spring, 1 year of summer, 1 year of fall, and 1 year of winter. And he said, this is how it is. So when you come into sobriety, your first year is like a spring, your second year is like a summer, your third year is like a fall, and your fourth year is like a winter. And he said, the way that it was in the old days, when you went around the cycle of life, he said, every 4 years, a little baby come in, there's something you're supposed to learn in that season. Spring, summer, fall, winter. Spring, summer, fall, winter, now you're 8 years old. Spring, summer, fall, winter, now you're 12. And all the way around the cycle of life, he said, there's things that you're supposed to learn during this time. But he said, what happened is, he said, what happens to a lot of us in the program is, he said, we're supposed to learn something. But maybe because our parents was alcoholics or maybe other reasons, but he said, you're supposed to learn something. And what happened is you didn't. And then you got older, you're supposed to learn something. And then you didn't. Then you're supposed to learn something. And you're not being taught. All while you're growing up as a little kid, as he said, you're being taught. You were supposed to be taught, but you weren't taught. And then he said, by the time you get to the teenager years, you have no identity. You don't even know who you are. And he says, then that's about the age you start drinking and drugging. And then he said, you can end up not growing emotionally. You could be a 40-year-old teenager because you haven't grown up the way that you were supposed to grow up. A long time ago, they knew it. But he said, no, you don't know. My parents attended the boarding schools. And my dad was a very mean alcoholic when he was drinking. And so our whole family was very interesting what happened. My mother, became an enabler and all that crazy stuff that a lot of you guys know, you see, that went on. And so what Johnny Lippincott told me is, he said, this is what the 12 steps is about. As he said, a long time ago, he said, on the earth, that's what the principle, laws, and values are. And he said, when you started drinking, you drifted way out in space. Then he said, a lot of people die out there, but you didn't. And he said, so then you run into these steps. And he said, these 12 steps, they're a way to get you to return back to be in harmony with this earth. He said, this is how we're going to look at these 12 steps. And he said, when you work those 12 steps, it means you come back to be that person that God intended you to be, the cultural person, the traditional person. That's the way he talked to me. And I kind of had no idea what he was talking about. It sounded good, but I couldn't see that happening to me. You see, it didn't seem like that's what was going on. So he said, he called this the red road. So he said, this red road is to get you back to be in harmony. And he said, these 12 steps, this is what's doing it. So he said, we need to start getting you to think circles and cycles. So one of the first things he gave me as instructions, he said, we're going to take these 12 steps and we're going to put them in a circle. He said, because that's how the Indians are. He says, we think circles are cycles. So he said, we're going to put steps 1, 2, 3 in the east, steps 4, 5, 6 in the south, steps 7, 8, 9 in the west, 10, 11, 12 in the north. And he said, steps 1 to 3, that's like a new day, a new sunrise. He said, this is where you'll find your relationship with your higher power or your creator. That's what that happens in steps 1 to 3. Then he said, you go on to the inventory steps 4, 5, 6. And this is where you find yourself, your strength, your weaknesses. And then he said, you go to the west, this is where you got to make amends. You go set it right with your relatives. It's like sunset, forgive, let it go. And he said, this is where you start to set yourself right with all your relations, is how he called it. And in 10, 11, 12, he said, now you're in harmony with the earth, with the elders' teachings. And so I didn't know that you could put the 12 steps in a circle. But when he did that, all of a sudden it started to make sense to me. something just started to click inside of myself as to how this program was working. And so then what I learned was in these 12 steps, I had to go back to the past. I had to go back to that cycle of life to see what was I missing, what happened. I had to take a look at what happened when I was sexually abused as a young boy during that cycle of life to prepare myself for the present and then set myself up for a recovery future, is the way he explained it. And so what he had told me is he said, why you feel lost, as he said, is for this reason. He said, we watched you, he said, when you come into AA. And he said, it's sort of like an oak tree. The oak tree in the spring, a sap starts to flow in that oak tree. And the oak tree doesn't know it. But it takes a little while, and pretty soon the oak tree starts to bud. Gets little buds in all these branches. Not anything is too clear, but it does feel that life is there. Then he says, you come into the summertime. So in that springtime, when you come into the recovery, all of a sudden you sense like this feelings of hope, and this crazy time. You look at some possibilities and you dream, and the dreams go away, and you get mad and angry and setbacks, and you can just sense changes in the air, and there's a different energy. A lot of times the other people in AA will feel that energy before you. They'll notice, they'll say, man, you're kind of glowing, or they'll kind of notice something's going on with you. And you don't kind of believe them, but yet all of a sudden it seems like something is going on. And then when they say, keep coming back, it starts to mean something. It just takes on a new thing. And this is how the springtime is. Then like the oak tree, those buds start to unfold, and the oak tree starts to take shape. So now in the second year, this is where you start to see some boundaries. The energy is kind of leveled off. You're not so panicky. You get comfortable relationships with the Creator. You kind of enjoy the learning. You kind of enjoy the meetings, not like scared to go to them, and you'll see good going on. And myself, I started paying bills and being responsible, and being able to see my kids and showing up when I was supposed to, and things like this. And you kind of realize this is a program that's kind of working. And then we come into the fall season. And in the fall season, it's just like the oak tree. In the fall, it's like fruits and harvest and orange and red and colorful, and people are taking your picture. And when you get into that third year sobriety, it's just like you can feel you can do no wrong. It's sort of like, I wanted to stay like this forever. That's how I want it. That's how the oak tree would think. I'm as beautiful as you can get right now. Just leave me be this way. So during that fall season, then all of a sudden the temperature changes a little bit, and a gust of wind comes along, and some of the leaves go away. And so the oak tree says, it's no big deal. He says, I got a lot of leaves. A little more time goes on, temperature goes away. Wind comes along and blows about a fourth of the leaves away. Now the oak tree is thinking, wait a minute now. I better start going to more meetings. I better pay attention to these steps. I better call my sponsor a little bit more, because it senses there's something is going away. And so then temperature changes, gust of wind comes along, and pretty soon about 3/4 of the leaves, they just go away like in a big shoot. And all of a sudden now the oak tree is just going, what in the hell is going on? What have I done? And so what happens, Johnny Cloud, he told me, that's what's happened to you. You come in that year, you come into a winter season, there's nothing wrong. God's not bad. You're not doing anything wrong. You're just coming into a winter time. That's the way it is. So during this winter time, all of a sudden you see this resistance kind of going on. You don't know what it is, but all of a sudden there's a sense of sadness, and there's like you get nostalgic. I remember when I first came in, or I remember when you start to remember the good old days, because everything seems to be falling apart. And you start to think, oh my God, it's going to stay this way forever. I'm screwed. Recovery is just going to be ugly. And you have some sabotage sometimes. But the point of the winter time is there's three questions that you can't answer. One of those is you go, who am I? Just like the oak tree, can you imagine once it loses all of its leaves, it's wondering what the hell happened? I had 3 seasons, everything was really cool, and now no leaves. So we don't know we lose our sense of purpose. And you'll hear people in meetings, they'll say, I don't even know who I am anymore. Or they'll lose their sense of identity. I don't know who I am. I'm looking for who I am, and you don't know where you're going. And so that's the way he started to explain to me. I thought God was mad because I said shit and God in the same sentence. And all of a sudden I thought, okay, he said, okay, I'm going to punish you. But it wasn't that at all. There was nothing wrong. I was just in the winter. So the question is, the winter time is not a bad season. A winter time is the time for renewal. Doesn't it make sense that the oak tree needs to lose its leaves so it take on a new shape when spring comes next? It's going to be a whole new tree, a whole new purpose, and that's the way with us. These leaves represent our beliefs, some of our attitudes, some of our expectations. They got to be let go of in order for us to prepare ourselves to see what are we going to do next. And so I remember when Johnny Looking-Cloud explained to me, he says, you're just in the winter time. I was driving back home, and I took the back road back home from this place, and I started to cry because I knew I knew my sobriety wasn't going away. I didn't know about the seasons. I didn't know that was a part of it until he explained that to me. Everybody goes through that. So he said it'll happen years 3 to 4, then it'll happen again years 7 to 8, it'll happen again 11 to 12, it'll happen again 15 to 16, 19 to 20. Every 4 years, just like the oak tree, every 4 years, every 4th season, it's going to lose its leaves. That's going to happen to you. And he said a lot of people slip 3 to 4, 7 to 8, 11 to 12, because they think something's wrong and they go out. Now, the seasons doesn't only apply to just the individual in recovery. It also applies, I'll just mention briefly, it applies to our relationship. 2 people get together for a relationship, it starts a season for that relationship. Your relationship will go in a 4-year cycle: spring, summer, fall, winter, spring, summer, fall, winter. These seasons that we're talking about, these are not the outside seasons. These are spiritual seasons. These are inside, like the spirit behind the season. It's not the environmental. These are spiritual seasons. So your relationship can also go through a 4-year cycle. So in that cycle, maybe your mate is going through a spring, summer, fall, winter. Maybe she's in a fall, and maybe you're in a winter. You'll find that there's sometimes a personality conflict going on just because one person's in the season, they don't know who they are, and the other one's in the fall, and they're just happy as heck. So you can have this conflict going on, between the two. And so maybe the question is, before we go on here, is how do you know what season you're in? That might be a good question. Well, the way that our experience is telling us is that when you are born, this is when you start your 4-year cycle. You come out of the womb, spring, summer, fall, winter, and you go through this cycle. Well, for some of us, what happens is we end up way out in space, and the alcohol and the drugs it takes, all these things. So what the elders tell us is that when you have a spiritual experience, maybe I remember like when I took the 3rd step, what happens, the Creator will reset your seasons. You have a spiritual experience like mine. I had this spiritual experience when I took the 3rd step. That spiritual experience will put you in the spring. So how I measure my seasons now is from that first year when I took the 3rd step, not my birth age. Those are different, but it's the spiritual experience that I came in. So let's just say you take a look at your sobriety date. Every 4 years, 3 to 4, you're going to have a winter time. It'll happen again year 7 to 8 of your sobriety time, 11 to 12, 15 to 16, if this makes some sense. And so it's the circle system of recovery that we go through. So what that equates to is that wintertime is a renewal time. It's a letting go time. It's the time to let go of the past, take on new. It's a time to do a lot of reflective thinking, but not that something is wrong. It just means it's just a winter time. So then what happens here, if you take a look at the East, that would be the seasons that we're talking about here, spring, summer, fall, winter. So what happens when you get through the 4th year? You don't go back to the spring in the same place. You actually transition to the south part of a circle, spring, summer, fall, winter. So the first 4 years that you go through it, it's a survival. Doesn't it make sense? If you plant a seed, it's going to go spring, summer, fall, winter. And when you get back to spring again, you say, okay, I got it. Phew. There's not another surprise coming. I kind of know what the hell is going on. So when you come into AA recovery, or it could be Al-Anon, or it could be narcotics, whatever it is, when you go through this 4-year cycle, the first 4 years is survival. Then the second 4 years, your transition is made during the winter season. That's when you move to the next. That's why it feels so weird, because you're moving into a different space, like another orbit, except you don't know you're moving. All you know is, I don't know why I am, I don't know who I am, and I don't know where I'm going. But that next 4 years, what happens is you experience now the ability to choice. A lot of this work is done in step 2. Step 2 came to believe that a power greater than ourselves could restore us. So this is where you start to have choices. You start to take a look at improved relationships or jobs or, whatever it is you're looking at. So then you go through 4 years of choice. Then you make that move again. When winter comes at years 7 to 8, then you move. So the arrow would go from that winter to the spring of the third cycle, and that was called influence. So say that you do the choice, you make it. You do survival, you make it. You have choice. Have you ever noticed people in the program that make good choices, they're the ones that you want to sponsor you. You can just kind of tell that their life is a little bit different. So that's who you want to go hang with, because they're influential now. It's like when I chose my sponsor, I watched how they lived their lives. Is what attracted to me to ask these people to take me through the work. Then once you get through the work, influence, then you go to the north, and this is where there's mastery. And then you go through the 4 year cycles again. This is 16 years of sobriety. 3 to 4, 7 to 8, 11 to 12, 15 to 16. 15 to 16 is a little bit different. If you look at the transitions you make in this 16 years, you are making a transition within a circle. What happens after the 16 years of sobriety? That might be the question. So the 16 years of sobriety is followed by 16 years for a 64-year cycle. So when you take the 16-year cycle, when you're done, the survival, then you're going to go to the choice, but your transition is way, way different. It's not the same. So this is what happens every 15 to 16 years. Let's say, for example, that let's say you go to the moon and you're going to do some recovery work. And the rule is you can only stay on the moon for 16 years. When you're done with 16 years, you got to come back to the earth. And so I use this example because my background's in engineering, I suppose. But anyway, when you come back when the rocket takes off for the moon, then it comes back, you look at what you've done. This happens when you go 15 to 16. All of a sudden, you just take a look at, well, I should have done this, and I should have made this work, and I could have done this. You get kind of nostalgic. But this is what is important in a 15 to 16-year cycle. When a rocket leaves the moon to come back to the Earth, it has to hit 100 square mile window in space. So when it fires, it's got to do it just right so it goes to 100 square mile window. If it misses the window too high, it circles the sun. Death. If you go too low, you burn up. Can cause a lot of trouble. You got to hit the window. So what is that window? The 15 to 6-year cycle says you got to hit this window. That window is a sense of trust. That's what that window is. You got to hit this field of trust. For this reason is after a while, I guess the way I would word it is my experiences is the ego loves to analyze itself. It likes to tell you what's wrong with you. Well, I'll tell you, you call me this, because the ego says, I've been with you through every thick and thin. I know a lot about it. I'll help you figure out what's wrong with you. But this is what happens. After a while, you get into trouble in recovery, and you say, I better go call my sponsor. My sponsor saves my ass. Or you say, I better go to a meeting. The meeting saved my ass. Oh, I better go to a set of steps. The steps saved my ass. Oh, I better read that big book again. The big book saves my ass. Well, the way that I was taught, they said, those are pocket gods. Your sponsor does not save your ass. God saves your ass. The big book doesn't save. God saves your rear. So you develop these alternative things that you start to believe this is what saves me, and it's not really what it is. They're like little pocket gods, and the reason we get into trouble. So this is like what I was shown by Johnny Lookcloud what to do is he gave me a shell or a container, and then I just went out and I picked up some rocks about the size of a $50, quarter or so. And what he called it was to build an altar. And so I would pick up one of those rocks and I would say, this rock represents the big book. The big book don't save my rear. I'm going to turn this over, and I put that rock in the container. Then I pick this rock up and say, this book represents my sponsor. My sponsor don't save me. Only the Creator saves me. So I put that sponsor rock in that book. And I keep doing that, these things I depend upon. Meaning, sometimes it's your clarity that's your enemy. You're sober for a long time, you think you know everything. Well, I know that. Well, I've been that. I've done that. That would be another rock. I would take that and I would put that in that container. I put my family in there. I put my meetings in there. I put my big book in there until the only thing that I got left is the trust in the Creator, till I see the Creator is what saves my rear. Then that's what allows me to get through that window. I only have to do this 15 to 16. I did it again at 31 to 32. So that transition is kind of dangerous because a lot of people will have mental health problems. They'll fight depression. They'll fight some things you don't even know. Why am I feeling this way? You'll see people leave long-term relationships sometimes thinking that there's something wrong, and it really isn't. It's like you lose this connectionness to the Creator. And so then what happens is once you build that little altar, I call it, you put those rocks in there that you can see, okay, I'm back like in the beginning, just trusting God. Then what happens is I go get a new big book. When I come back to my meeting, all of a sudden my meeting is new. I'm not judging it. I'm listening and adding to it. I don't know how it happens. It just does. Things are new because I see that trusting God is that it's in the book, and it's in the steps, and it's in the deal. And so I'm able to make it through that type of transition. So that's the 15 to 16. Then it will happen again, 15, this after choice. Then it happens again to get 31 to 32, and then you end up with the area of influence at a different level. It's like at a different consciousness level. So that survival of the 16 years, it isn't like the first survival. This is like at a consciousness survival level. It's looking at deeper teachings and different things. And you go through this whole cycle with that 16 years like this. Each time going to that winter time, we lose that feeling of why am I, who am I, and where am I going? And so we go around this cycle of life because some of that cycle of life, it doesn't happen until we're in our 40s, until our 50s, until our 60s. If you want to know more details about the cycle of life, I haven't included it in here, but I'll have Ksenia put the link on where to go look at the teachings for the cycle of life. I think she will put the teachings for what that means on there, because that's what we go back and we look at for the cycle of life. And I think this is what happens during these winter times. That circle, that represents our clarity. So that's like when you first come in, you make decisions, pay your bills, make amends, and you do all this stuff. Then you go through the work again, and that circle gets bigger. And so now you can expand to do more things. But I think what happens is I think we are chosen in this program, and I think the Creator picks people, and He says, I got a purpose for you. The reason that you're sober, there's something I want you to do. And so whether we're men or women, He takes us and He takes us into this mystery, surrounding this field of clarity, like in our language, Tankashala, that means the great mystery. That's another name for God. And so we're taken into this mystery. And when we're in this mystery, I'm not so sure I know what happens. I know the drunken failure that I was when I came into AA with the guilt and the shame and all the stuff that I did. I was taken into this mystery. Who would ever think God would take me into this mystery? And what happens is, I don't know what happens in there. But when we come back, all of a sudden we appear back in a circle and we're different. We're not the same as we were. You could be a very strong, powerful, balanced woman or man, but something happens when we make that trip into the mystery. And I think this happens to us. It's in there that we're giving our purpose. I know the book says our real purpose is to be a maximum use to God and help others. That's a real reason why we work this stuff. And so what happens then is we go into this mystery, and He does something, gives us some things that when we come back, we're not the same. And so we're now back on how we were supposed to be, like Johnny Looking-Cloud said, is we're now back on this earth. We now know about the principal laws of values because each of our 12 steps has a principle. So we learn by living them. Magic really happens to us when we do those, and then we start to discover laws, and we start to discover values, and we go around the cycle of influence. And I mean, just look at this. Somebody got this idea of putting this program together and reaches people in different countries and different nations and different backgrounds. And here we are this particular day listening to a crazy Indian guy that got his teachings from Johnny Looking-Cloud. And it might make sense. You might say, something that makes sense to me. And that's what we do. We share this information you see with one another, and we come back to how we think this earth is, how we're supposed to be. We live now, some places, at least here, my current perception is we're living through some really crazy times here in the US. There's a lot of weird stuff going on and scary stuff going on, and the COVID in Indian country has taken a lot of death. It has had some effects on our sobriety. It has effects on people slipping, the politics and all this stuff. So what is it we do? We stick to this seasons. We know what seasons we're in. You know, it's sort of like in my marriage right now. Where my sobriety is I'm in a fall time, and my mate, she's in the winter time. So she is going through this. She doesn't know why she is, who she is, where she's going. So I gotta realize we have a fall to winter relationship. I gotta not be judging what's going on because she's supposed to be going through that. Not that she wants to. So she's really going through an examination thing, on her age and all this type of stuff. So for us, the seasons is very real. I run a nonprofit called White Bison. You know, where we run the company on doing things according to the seasons, or the system there as we know it. And so this is what I got to share on the cycle of life and the seasons, and what I feel we have gone through. My sobriety, I have 43 years, August 10th of continuous sobriety, and the longer I'm sober, I think longer term sobriety is sometimes harder than it used to be. I remember Johnny Looking-Cloud in his living room. He had this table sitting under one of his windows, a long table, and he had on there something we call river rocks. They're very flat and very round, all different sizes, and he painted some black and some white, black on one side, white on the other. And so when I got up enough nerve to ask him about this table of rocks, they were on there, all different sizes, and I asked him, I said, what does that mean? Why do you have those rocks like that? And he said, when I first went through the work, he said, I turned over all those big rocks and I thought I got them all. He said, I swear to God, I told everything in the steps and all that stuff. And then he said, a little time went on, and about a year later, I got discontent. So I went through the work again, and all of a sudden I discovered there were smaller rocks I didn't see through the big time. And so he said, I went through the work, and then I say, okay, now these smaller rocks is my big rock. So he turned them over from black to white, and he had little bitty rocks there. And he said, that's to remind me it's not over yet. He said, now those little bitty rocks, he said, they're a mother to see. Sometimes you can't see them very, very easily. But he said, that table reminds me, keep looking. You got to look hard. And he said, when he goes through the steps that last time, he said, his resentment list was shorter. His fear inventory was shorter. His sex inventory was shorter and different. But he said, it took me longer to find these darn little things that was irritating me because I can just overlook them so easy, or I rationalize or justify, what they are. And so I do that too. Then I got that little table, of those rocks for that same reason and I say sometimes longer term sobriety is it's harder, not easier. I think the other reason I sometimes struggle with it is who will tell you when you have your head where it shouldn't be? If you've got long-term sobriety and somebody's sober 5 years and they see it, they won't tell you because of this, whatever, they're not supposed to disrespect you or something. But I have 6 people in my life that that's what we do for one another. We watch one another, and we know that long-term sobriety, you hit your head where it shouldn't be. And we tell one another when we see that we kind of saving one another's life. That's how I see it. But to me, the seasons is it's a mind, even knowing about it. A few years ago, I remember when I went through 31 to 32, I knew about the seasons. I knew about 15 to 16, and I still went through a real struggling time. But there's a lot different knowing about it was okay. That there was nothing wrong with me. God wasn't mad to go through that 31 to 32 year cycle. I know it. I wasn't messing up. Like how I used to think. So I think that's would be my take on what the seasons are as I know it. The last thing I would mention is it's very important sometimes to pay attention for those of us who have dreams. You have springtime dreams, you have summer dreams, you have fall dreams, and you have winter dreams. And just like the environmental seasons, you have spring is beautiful, but it has an enemy. The summer is beautiful, but it has tornadoes. The fall is beautiful, but it has, and I think spiritually there's also these times, like when I have my spring dreams, there'll be dreams about weird things about growing or planting or change, or they'll be like things maybe I'm supposed to do next. Then the summer dreams, I won't have those kind of dreams in the summertime. So summertime will be about growing or obstacles or me standing in the way of something, like this. So it's important to also know that the seasons, they also have a set of dreams, that come with it. And so that's kind of my take on what I know about the seasons so far. I have shared these with different Native elders over the time. I was fortunate enough to go down to the Navajo country a few years ago, and the elders there taught me the seasons for 500 years. That's how the ancient knowledge was, that they know that something is supposed to happen, during these seasons. And so it's an old knowledge that people knew about, but I have found adding the culture to the 12 steps it really works very, very well. It changed for me when I was allowed to put them in a circle. I didn't know I could do that. And I think in the big book, it even states is we don't know all everything. There's other things that you'll discover. That book isn't completed, but it's our experience and sharing things like this, back and forth, and attending things like emotional sobriety. Boy, that's some really good information is passed back and forth on those. What the heck is emotional sobriety? And there's a lot of knowledge in our programs now. It's different than when it was in the 50s and 60s. We've had people who have done a lot of good work and have done a lot of reflective thinking on themselves.